our buildings architecture are getting the latest makeovers too. But the big question is, if we go with the flow and adopt technology, how will the heritage buildings that are so classic of South Mumbai survive? I'm going to request all the members to please grab your seats as the next panel discussion is about to begin. Could I humbly request each one of you to please take your seats? Ladies and gentlemen, may I please request you all to take your seats. The next session is on the changing face of South Mumbai architecture, and the panel discussion comprises of our speakers. May I please request our speakers to come on stage. Mr. Ratan Bhatnagoy, who is the founder and director of RJB and Associates. Could we have a huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for Mr. Ratan? Mr. Ratan will be our panel host for this session. Joining Mr. Ratan on the dais, I'd like to invite Mr. Jimmy Mistry, Principal Designer and Managing Director of Dela Resorts and Villas. Mr. Jimmy Mistry will be joining the panel shortly. May I also invite Mr. Shankar Patki, Architect Shankar Patki, and may I further request Ms. Nandini Sampath from Somaya and Kalapa Consultants to please come on stage. Let's have a round of applause. And Ms. Priya Vakil from Educated Environment. Ladies and gentlemen, is it possible to blend the old and new without compromising on the aesthetics and the functionality? Let's find that out from our panel members. Over to you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming architect Shekhar Bhakti on the dais.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Kaizad's act is going to be a tough one to follow. I think he's done a great job and kept us all alive. I think the afternoon's been great. What we're trying to do is slot in a sort of architect perspective. And I'm not sure, you know, when we grew up in college, we were taught that architect is God. And then we realized that, no, actually the developer is God. And then we actually realized that, no, actually the realtors who sell stuff for developers are making way into this whole puja space. So we're going to take you through a very, very quick sort of session. I must admit that I'm meeting my panelists for the first time. We all had these great plans about rehearsing this whole thing. But I think as it goes, I think it's going to be a really fresh, straight from the heart, sort of one-on-one relationship that we're going to share this afternoon. To kick off the project or the kickoff this presentation session, I'm going to play you through a very quick AV that we made, a sort of PowerPoint presentation that we made. And Vikram will help me from that. Can I control it from here? Yeah? Okay. So, changing face of South Bombay architecture. I think we're trying to keep this as tight as possible to the relevance of this auditorium and this audience and the realtor's viewpoint. Their classic nomenclature, their classic sales pitches, etc., the classic phrases that actually come into the space in terms of natural light. I heard this new one called expat finish, still parking. You know, there are these things that are in fact interpreted and thrown out because what realtors are doing is picking up jargonese from architects, picking up jargonese from developers, picking up jargonese from developers, marketing and sales agents. And that's giving a lovely flavor to the whole situation. Then there's the architect's viewpoint. The architect's viewpoint is pretty much, being into ourselves. We're talking about aesthetics all the time. We're talking about engineering solutions. We're talking about social impact. We're talking about lifestyle changes. We're talking about the public realm. You know, and this is really truly jargonese because only architects in the audience, pretty much on stage, will understand this relationship and understand these phrases. And unfortunately, unless we explain them to you, unless we explain them to the developers, unless we explain them to the reality market, I don't think everybody will appreciate what we're trying to do in terms of creating value for our properties. Something has happened. Hello, hello. Okay. And then there's the developer viewpoint, and the developer viewpoint has pretty much been always about the property. It's about, strange aspects that come up in life, new aspects, new thought processes, taking the old wine, bottling it again, and putting it out in paper, putting it out in the system to create an environment of collection or attraction to customer base. Strange things that used to work in the good old days was Italian marble. Strange thing that works today is full height. I don't know what that means, but there are these phrases that are sort of picked up and thrown at each other. So what we're going to do is look at it from 3 different perspectives as much as possible and see what we're talking about in a quick panel discussion. What we said, or what we've understood, is that the client is technically the customer who's pretty much buying, be it the investor, be it the user. And it's like a sort of supply and demand chain, or it's a supply chain which is being impacted. So you have version 1 which came out on the market, and then the realtor gets the striking blow because he's getting the brunt of it because he sold it to the client. The client feeds back to him, the realtor feeds back to the developer feeds back to the architect feeds back to the developer, makes a new building and creates version 2. And that's a sort of cyclic process, and I think it's a very exciting way to look at it because you can see that every one of us has a role to play in this lovely big canvas of South Bombay. Bombay to Mumbai is pretty much where we're supposed to be. Nandini is going to make us a quick presentation after this and talk about some very impactful situations that we're talking about in terms of being architects and being the sort of literally the architects of the new way we live in our lives. So, Bombay to Mumbai, taking you through a few slides that show what South Bombay is all about. From the Indo-Saracenic times to the Art Deco, to the public buildings, to the social buildings, to critical civic buildings, etc., entertainment spaces. They actually want to redo the facade of the LIC building, just for the record. So we're going through this lovely phase of life, and over the past 30 or 40 years, dramatically changing behavior from all sides. I remember what waves the Vastu building had made when Hafiz had built it earlier. Suddenly you've got these new technologies, you've got these imported architects, you've got these imported ways of doing things, this incredible technology which allows you to build a slab every 11 days, etc. And there are these completely different characters that are happening on the Bombay landscape, specifically in South Bombay as we go forward. If we look at the city scale, we're talking about how the city is growing, and very simply what the red mark used to be was the cluster of city and Bombay. Slowly it started spreading, and now it's taking over this entire relationship, okay? As you can see now in relationship, in perspective, Sobo is really small, but a very important and key player in this entire game. There's transport-led development, there's the metro coming, there's the monorail coming. These are transport-led developments which is creating huge banks of land that are happening within the Bombay environment. At a precinct scale, which is smaller than a city scale, we're talking about redundant mills. Just to give you a quick one example, for example. The old mills that we have, which are being redeveloped, all of us know where these huge land parcels are happening. Whether you develop them for commercial space or whether you develop them for residential space. And at a building scale, what we're suddenly realizing on a much more small, much more micro scale, that buildings are really being reused for certain purposes. This is the old opera house, the Royal Opera House. which suddenly has become or had become retail stores. These are residential buildings at Fountain, at DN Road, which were golden buildings on the golden mile between VT and the Fort, which have been converted into a very, very high market sort of high street, the way we used to look at it 10, 15 years ago. Beautiful heritage buildings of ours are being created with an adaptive reuse or reuse of its purpose. The Horniman Circle, we have Christian Louboutin on one side, we have Hermes on the other side, and we have Bademia on the other side. So we've got this lovely, strange relationship of how things are happening in a Bombay environment. And then you've got heritage buildings and laws allowing us to build on top of heritage buildings as long as we preserve the heritage building. Okay? So there are these issues that are also happening. Just quickly going into trend spotting, and we've heard about it in the last couple of sessions. We're looking at a little more sensitive space relationship. We're looking at a house versus a home. We're looking at the homes being inward-looking. We're looking at a house being an inside-outside relationship. We're looking at a house being a symbol of status, of display, of expression. Whether you talk about being part of a 40, 50, 60, 70, 100-story building, or whether you form yourself as a part of a maybe 10-story, reasonably developed relationship. You have these promises that are put out on the marketplace in terms of the view that is promised, when actually it's this kind of view. Yeah? Now, what is exciting is that these images are not specific to any developer. These are images of Bombay which are agnostic to the developer. And unfortunately, all of us become brand blind after a certain time. We don't remember who this developer was or what was promised. Change in the type of users. Joint families have become sort of nuclear families. Nuclear families are giving rise to individuals as buyers and users on their own. So there's a huge drift in terms of the user type as well. There's the new typology, adaptive flexible spaces. You had original spaces like this which created or allowed you to have residential and service blocks, etc., etc. There is the fixed and modifiable spaces. You have imposed choices. You have limited possibilities. And now everything is opening up. The new trends that are happening today are this bungalow dream, and therefore you have bungalows stacked on top of bungalows, stacked on top of bungalow, which is somewhat promised to by a lot of developers. The sky apartments, double heights, decks, swimming pools, plazas, large-scale developments, luxury. What's the way forward? And I think what's important here, and I'm going to share the thoughts that my panelists have with you guys in terms of what's the way forward for Mumbai, for South Bombay. What's the changing face of South Bombay's architecture? How is it going to impact realtors? How is it going to impact developers? How are developers going to impact the realty system and eventually the architectural profession? So on the way forward, we've got stuff like sustainable design, which is taking a huge leap. Basa was talking about it. People are conscious of it. There's the user-oriented scenario, which is investors are sort of moved out, nudged out of buying into properties because they're not allowed to sell. There is this inclusive development, and that's being triggered off by your SRAs, your new development schemes, your rehab schemes, your project-affected people schemes. And then there's the most important question about how do you conserve, how do you preserve your heritage? What makes South Bombay South Bombay? What gives it its special flavor? Do you credit the British with giving us our infrastructure and say, let's preserve it the way it was? Do you change it? Do you modify it? Do you adapt it to what you want it to be? These are the questions we're going to try and answer as we go along. Thank you. So I'm going to stand behind this lectern because it sort of hides my stomach. Yeah. I have a few questions that I'd like to start with. Maybe what we can do is, Nandini, you can make the presentation and then we can take it off altogether. Yeah, should we do that? Yeah, Vikram, would you help us with that? It's a little sensitive, just near the point of that.
Good evening, everybody, and I'd like to thank SMART for inviting us today to speak. Today, I'll just be introducing you all to buildings and their spaces in between, revitalization of urban neighborhoods. This goes beyond the building, but how it affects us and how it affects the city. Out onto the streets. And Mumbai, like many parts of India, we have to consider this. We have to look beyond the building. So I request you all to take a moment through the chaos that always pursues around us and look back a little bit. This is what CST used to look like. If you notice the little horse-drawn carriages in the front section, the lack of congestion, the beauty of the building standing out. Sorry, something wrong with that. And this is what we know it today. All the extensions that come out of it and the terrible traffic that is in front of it at all times. Again, Flora Fountain during its heyday, really a walkable part of the city. You could enjoy all types of transportation and enjoy the buildings around it. And once again, today, it is barely able to contain the space within it, and the congestion is incredible around it. Sorry. Kala Ghoda, the statue as it was in its old days, surrounded by the beautiful buildings. And now, it is replaced by parking, and the statue is actually gone. So South Mumbai has really changed over the years. We know that. We know the structures that remain. We know that we are being affected by congestion, overpopulation. But we are also becoming desensitized as Mumbaikars. We need to revive our senses. We need to remember. We need to realize what is around us. Mumbai is known for its density. We're a very dense city. It is also the most important and valuable part of our city. It is what keeps our city safe. Through the media, we've just realized it's the abandoned parts of the city where crime is increasing, where security is becoming worse. So we must value our density. We must remember it is one of the most important parts of our city. Sorry, struggling. The other problem is with the difference between the rich and the poor. It's becoming a very walled city. Every time a new construction comes up, the walls go higher. We're directed for the walls to go higher. But in such a melting pot of a city, it's a very dangerous way to go forward. Walls are not the answer to make this city more cohesive, to build communities. We have to look at every part of the city, starting from a pavement, starting from a square foot. A very famous urban developer called Jean Gell always said that there are 5 basic principles that you can use when you are designing any part to make things less isolated and more in contact. You should have no walls so that people are more interactive, shorter distances, less levels and instead of different levels, and orient people towards each other. These are very basic principles that can be adopted on any level of design in order for us to encourage a more open atmosphere, in order for us to encourage a more secure atmosphere. So as real estate people, as a real estate community, what is the question that often comes to you all? It is not always that what is the best building, but what is the best area to live in? You always get, is it this area, or is this area a little better, or this area a little worse? People are wondering, is my family going to be safe here? Is my property going to be protected? Are there open spaces? So it's the area that comes to mind first before the building. Charles Currier, the very famous architect, said, "Let us not build in isolation. Let us build with the rest of the community in mind." So I know as real estate agents, we often think of the single building. But let us move beyond and look at the amenities around and finally look at the building in perspective of the city as a whole. And that's where we talk about building and the spaces in between. That is what is going to revitalize the community. That is what is going to make the building sell better if we improve that community as a whole. So in a city, we have to strive for equality, that everybody get a certain standard of shelter, adequate infrastructure, which with the amount of construction that's coming in the city is a real big question mark, a sense of belonging and a sense of place. Mumbai is special is because of its culture, because of its heritage, because of the historic buildings. We have to protect all these aspects. So that's what we can sell. So we always believe in having the god of small projects. It's the small projects that have the big impact. And it doesn't matter whether it's as a real estate agent, whether as designers and architects, we can always do our part to have an impact on a larger scale, but starting with the small projects. Architecture must be considered on a human scale first before we look at the larger impact. We've done this in our firm through a community project, which I'll quickly share with you, where we've looked at a play yard of a school. A trust approached us to upgrade the whole play yard. But what we realized is we cannot do it just in respect to the school. It has to be with respect to the community. So we told them that we'll redesign it while keeping the community in mind and not just the school. So of course, we first analyzed the accessibility. What are the current problems over there? We had a lot of antisocial elements. We had people accessing the site illegally. We had also a variety of people using the site. And as you can see, we had a whole backing of slums right on the perimeter of the property. Instinctively, one of the things the trustees wanted to do was to have this property to raise money for corporates to hire out. And instinctively, a lot of them said, please put up a big fence and green it, so we don't see any of that. But that also wasn't a solution. By excluding people is not the answer. We have to make it inclusive. Automatically, you make it safe and make it part of the community. We analyze the current activities. How were the slum dwellers using it? How were the Chol people using it? How was the school using it? How is its current usage? What are their needs and aspirations? What do they want from it? Looking beyond, just the actual user, looking at the neighborhood needs and aspirations. And then we looked at the challenges. How do we get rid of dark and shady areas to get away of antisocial elements? A constant male dominance. A lot of women did not feel safe to come here. There was a lack of children actually using the facilities. And finally, garbage. There's no sense of ownership. It's not mine. I don't know whose it is, so I can throw it. If there's no sense of ownership, it's absolutely left to be abused. So what can be done? We created lively edges. We made sure that you could view the whole park from one side to the other. That naturally creates security. And of course, make it accessible to all types of age groups. So we developed a concept where we would have daily activities and occasional activities that would be accessible both for the neighborhood and for the school children. And we marked this right from the morning to the afternoon to the evening as giving activities and giving access to the park to different people. We redesigned it and controlled some of the entry points so that they can be more secure and we can have a look at who is entering and using it. We also proposed a layout which was much more open. There were no dark, dingy areas. If you enter the park, you could see the entry and exits very clearly and all the activities that were being carried out. The proposed activities were very varied. It's amazing how people of all types of living have aspirations. They wanted a yoga area, they wanted a gym area, they wanted to walk, they wanted their cricket pitches. So all that was provided, circulation was provided. Security, again, barrier-free. By not creating that horrible large fence with green, the slum dwellers themselves could be a source of protection for those that were playing by the openings created in their windows. So automatically that became a source of security. Occasional activities that could take place and enhance the community, art displays, the neighborhood requirements. basic design elements that were incorporated, getting them involved in gardening and the green aspects. And this was the final views, a very simplistic plan, but a plan that went beyond the structure, a plan that went beyond the school, and the plan that brought a community together. The point is that it should really bring people together. It should be inclusive. That is what is going to make our neighborhoods safer, more secure, and better property for everybody to sell. So as was said earlier, where is our next train stop? Jane Jacobs, an American urban writer and activist, said, "Cities have the capability of providing something for everybody, only because and only when they are created by everybody." I truly believe that all of us can have that impact, even on the small scale projects. As Mr. Sriram said earlier, a little amended version of what he said, speak and act not to impress, but to impact. Thanks.
Thank you, Nandini. I think what is important to take away from and what came to my mind straight away is you're getting into the mind of the architect, and you're seeing how the architect is physically taking a proposition, converting it, thinking out of the box, making it a much bigger, much more meaningful sort of proposition. Jimmy, one thing I must tell you, Nandini is actually a law graduate. Slowly became and went into do her master's in interior architecture, and then finally became an architect very recently. You just got a degree. Yeah? And she's now looking after, jointly with her mother, Somaya Kalapa, and that's the practice. Jimmy, I'm just going to throw you a quick question. Do you think, in your perception as an architect or as a practicing sort of MD of an architectural firm, largish, doing different perspectives, doing different projects, do you think in a South Bombay area, going vertical is the only sort of solution?
Ratan, across the world, if we compare FSIs, FARs, there is no other option but going vertical. We look at downtown Manhattan, you're talking of a 35 FAR, you're looking at London, FARs and FSI is completely intradependent on the design, and the design committee approves what FSI you can consume. Within Bombay, where land is of prime value, going vertical is the only solution, and in fact, going vertical also helps in freeing up and coming up with some open spaces. So in my opinion, definitely going vertical is the only solution. But like she was saying, if the architect is designing, putting himself or herself into the place, and there is an emotional quotient attached to the design, I think the design gets sensitized. You design with a different approach for a different canvas. You're doing design for EWS, or you're doing the super affluent designer label, and everything in between. The design needs to be sensitized, and the architects need to be emotionally involved with the project. And there are various reasons why they can and they can't.
Yeah. Shekhar, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, Ratan, I think...
yeah, we're on.
I agree with Jimmy in terms of, I think going vertical is the only way to do that. Because I think Bombay still doesn't have FSIs which sort of compete with Hong Kong and Singapore, etc. We're still at the 3 to 4 FSI bracket.
Yeah.
I think perhaps we need to reassess our infrastructure that goes with the FSI, and I think that's where this whole thing comes to its bottleneck. That while we might increase the FSI and provide more housing both for the slum dwellers, the SRA schemes, your redevelopment schemes, because I think Sobo is all about redevelopment. Now, I don't think there are any open plots left for us to do. And very correctly, as he put it, I think there will have to be some sort of parity between what you're going to build for the affluent, what you're going to build for the slum dweller, because they're going to live practically next to each other as neighbors. They're going to share the same open spaces, they're going to share the same community environments. And I think that's going to be the biggest challenge for architects today, because how are we going to actually build for spaces which are other than the residences? What about the community spaces? What about the car parking? What about the What about the infrastructure and everything else that goes with it? What about the schools? We have inadequacy of all of this that is hitting us straight across. And I think other than all of the issues that we're discussing about how are we going to sort of complement the heritage along with the new structures and all that, I think somewhere we must also look upon these basic social issues as how are we going to face over the next 20, 25 years are going to be faced with.
Yeah, thank you. Priya, quick one. You run an organization called Educated Environments, yeah? It's a sort of green building scenario. You talk about sustainability, etc. You know, sustainability has become a big buzzword with a lot of developers. At least it was sort of fashionable to get into sustainability maybe 3-5 years ago, because every developer had to have a sustainability certificate, a LEED certificate, etc. In our space, we looked at it sometimes as greenwash because you had to do it. I'd like to get Priya to give us a quick overview on where sustainability is going in our development and how it will impact developers and how it will impact the actual brokers who are selling this as a sort of key point. Go ahead.
I'm a green building consultant, and my job is to work with developers and architects on their projects and to essentially consult on how to make buildings more energy efficient, how we can perhaps choose better materials, provide better indoor environments for the occupants. The only reason I still have my job is because our lifestyles have changed and the way we build buildings has not. We need more air conditioning and automation and all kinds of things. I'm going to use a quick example to actually perhaps share my viewpoint on the way we look at buildings, sell buildings, buy apartments, and all of that. But just for people who aren't fully convinced about why we do green building certification or why we need green building consultants, I just wrote down 5 or 6 key statistics. The way we use buildings now, in terms of energy, we use more than 5 times the energy we used to, maybe 10 years ago. Every time we turn on a 1-ton air conditioning unit, it's like turning on 30 ceiling fans. That's in terms of energy. In terms of waste, we've all been reading articles, even in the newspaper, about how the city can't cope with its waste. A few years ago, the waste every family would generate is 0.1 grams a day, and now it's 6 times that, which means any township that we build which has 10,000 homes or families generates 6 tons of waste every day. I had another one on water, which was, the demand and supply in our city, in Mumbai. There's such a big gap between that we've started to rely on groundwater. And we now have the fastest depleting water table in the world, which is kind of shocking considering how much it rains in Mumbai and this part of the country. So having said that, and a few years ago, green building certification did become very popular, and it was started by the Indian Green Building Council based in Hyderabad. A lot of developers were looking at getting their buildings green building certified. Mumbai is in fact the leading city in India with the maximum number of green buildings that have been registered. And India is number 3 in the world in terms of number of green buildings registered with this Green Building Council. So having said that, we would think that we're all fairly aware about the environment. This is a story from actually just last week. I went with a few cousins who were looking to buy an apartment in BKC. I don't know if that's still South Mumbai, but we ended up there. And of course, very high end. Our project, the project sales team knew exactly what they had to say. So every bit of detail related to the travertine that was used in the lobby, including the Burma teak on the ceiling, the extra parking lots, all of that was explained. Not to forget the riverside views of the Mithi River, which are always a delight. So all of that was, of course, explained. And in fact, the cousins I were with were very sort of impressed. And you know, all their questions regarding loading and FAR and all kinds of things were answered. It was my turn to ask something. And I said, you know, can you tell me a little more about the green features of the building? To which the sales rep said, you know, we have a podium and it's landscaped, you know, very well. And I said, well, that's great, but you know, what about a green building certification or something like that? We've done whatever, you know, we had to for environmental clearance. So this building is completely 100% in sync with the environment, and we've done what we had to. And then I said, okay, maybe I should drop a hint. So I said, what about things like maybe rainwater harvesting or solar panels? To which he said, you know, I will have to get back to you on that, and you know, just give me a day. I'll check and get back to you. Which to me was very embarrassing, since I was with family and they all know what I do, and it was shocking that, you know, this is kind of what's out there. And perhaps what comes out of it is, even though these are questions that may be in the minds of people who are going out there to buy apartments and for, you know, realtors who are trying to sell them, energy and questions related to waste are important. And I think, you know, at times it's just about asking the right question. In fact, I was this morning I was at a conference related to power and electricity, where they were mentioning the cost of energy is going to go up by 20%. Water is cheaper, but it's not easily available. So for me, the changing face of South Mumbai is going to be completely impacted by the questions we ask as consumers and as developers and realtors. And sustainability is in fact a very important part of that.
Okay. I'm going to take this very quickly because otherwise we're going to run out of time, but we'll sort of do a quick rounder situation because I have a few questions that I'd like everybody's opinion on. So Nandini, what do you feel about foreign architects coming in here and impacting the face of South Bombay, or Bombay for all matters?
Hello?
Yeah.
Well, I think we have some things to learn from them. When we go vertical, they do come with a set of expertise, which is always interesting. Vertical buildings are challenging, and we are always learning. But there are certain aspects of our living that they are sometimes unable to understand. I remember in some discussions when we were with some foreign architects, we were discussing that what if a servant throws something out of the 100th floor? What's going to happen? So they said nobody throws anything out of the 100th floor, you just lock all the windows. And you know, if the buyer is cleaning and something goes off, that's it. Somebody can die on the lower floors. So there are certain Indian problems that are inherently we take for granted when we live and we construct. And I think that has to be customized very carefully as we move ahead. But I also think that Indian architects now are very capable of doing great architecture in our environment.
Yeah. So Shekhar, a quick one. You know, we have, you know, a broker will broker a deal and get 1% of the value of the flat. 2%, sorry. This is the smart team, okay? It just makes my life worse because the architect is being haggled about 2% on the construction cost, okay? So do you have a comment on that?
For the architect's fees?
Yeah. Let them know where we go.
Do you want me to comment on architect's fees?
Yeah, just a quick one.
Do you get fees?
No, considering the architect is actually putting his brains into it, environment, completely looking at a total solution, adding value, in fact, creating value for the whole proposition, okay? So this is where I'm coming from.
No, Ratan, seriously, I mean, I've had this conversation with several of my friends and with a lot of my builder friends. If you take a scenario 5 years ago, your cost of cement, cost of steel, cost of construction was whatever, 30% less than what it is today. Your contractor is being paid on that. Your contractor gets escalation. Your contractor gets increases wherever he goes.
Wrong question,
all,
guys.
all our broker friends get their 2% or whatever else they get.
From
but
each
that's
side.
2%.
From each
each side,
side,
that
yeah.
makes 4%. The architect's fees have been, I don't know whether you work on percentages, but I don't think most architects work on percentages any longer. They are paid 5 rupees a square foot, 22 rupees a square foot. Some of my friends work on 2 rupees a square foot, so that's what's going on.
Yeah.
So if architects were being paid, whatever, 100 rupees yesterday, they are being paid 50 rupees today. So I don't even know whether there is any parity left in it.
Let's see what Jimmy has to say. Quick one, guys. Yeah.
I think the architecture profession is going through the worst phase as far as the Indian architecture community is concerned.
Worse than what the realtors are going through?
Probably yes.
Okay.
Worse than what they're going through. The onslaught of the international consultants entering the country happening since the last almost 7-8 years, and last 5 years, almost all major projects having been taken over by them. The Indian architects are left to fend for themselves as their coordinating architects, predominantly working on working drawings. The fees are in percentage in square feet. The markets have changed, and now square feet are converting to lump sum fees. And lump sum fees, if you actually convert, come to a point where you are not even in a condition to pay your draftsman salary the way it should be. Forget about paying the architects of a certain caliber.
Okay, let me get out of this one. Sorry, guys. Wrong question. Yeah.
Sorry, Ratan,
We need a separate seminar for this because I have a lot to say as well. Yeah.
Ratan, sorry, I have something to add to what Nandini mentioned about foreign architects, because I've been experiencing this for a very, very long time. For some reason, the Indian developers have a fancy for the foreign architects. All said and done, I think it's not about the architects. If you've actually worked with an architectural company, whether it's Caesar Pelli, SOM, Callison, whatever, they do add value, but it's not the architect who adds value. If you study the project, it's the structural engineer who adds value to a high-rise building. It is not the architect. It's the Arabs who add value to it.
I'm glad that point came up because, you know, we're in a coexistent situation. We cannot function unless we have a client. If I was a painter, I'd paint for myself and pray that somebody bought my painting. But as an architect, I can't build for myself and pray that somebody buys my building. Okay? So that's a big problem that we have as well.
The second issue is if you've got a 100-storied building, 50-storied building, there is no international architect who's going to stick his neck out. He brings in the facade consultant. It's the facade consultant who gives the value to the facade, to the treatment that is going into it. It's not the architect. So I think somewhere this misnomer that the foreign architect is adding value to Indian architecture, Indian skyline, no, it's not true at all, because I'm somebody who's dealing with it day in and day out. It's not the architects. They put their brand name on it, but that's beyond that, they do nothing for it. In fact, I've seen some photographs or some 3Ds which have been put outside. If all of you guys are in the building industry, if you're going to tell me somebody is able to live in that building and somebody is going to be able to, it's a rendering of some developer which is put out outside their long, tall building over there. It's just complete glass. And it's got some, striped things going down. I believe that must be the car park below that. He's trying to sell his scheme to an Indian developer. That's never the way that it's going to come out. And all of us deal with the environment, deal with people who are telling you to cut your glazing down to 40% of your areas. So I mean, somewhere, Ratan, there has to be some sort of parity in what is happening here. And I think somebody needs to spell it out. So let me be the person.
Sure. And let me give you a quick anecdote from my lifetime, okay? I did my thesis in my college 35 odd years ago. And my subject was on the development control rules. And at that time, the DCR was a 100-page book, and I knew it backwards, in and out, up and down, okay? A few years ago, Section 33 was introduced. And that section itself is a 400-page section. And then there's interpretation of that section, which is a 4,000-page logic, okay? So talking about how work has happened, how architecture has happened, how development has happened, how developers are reacting to policy and the government has also been a huge, huge fight or a huge, huge uphill climb that we have, okay? There's this special breed of liaison architect which has erupted in our midst. And we're trying to figure out what they do, what we do, what the foreign architects do, etc., etc. And in all this, we're talking about the changing face of South Mumbai. Okay. Let me look at just a quick question thrown out. What about this neutralization that's happening? Because we've lost our Indianness. We've lost. Forget about the Indianness. We've lost whatever we had in terms of a unique identity in a Bombay environment. Okay, we never really had our own Bombay style, so to speak. We talked about Saracenic architecture, we talked about an Art Deco that was sort of brought into the system, and then we had this lovely PWD phase where we just had architecture which was functional, more functional than Deco and much more stripped of all its trimmings. I just want to know, and then we had the glass and the steel and the foreign technologies and things coming in. What do you feel, quickly? Priya, you can start. What do you feel about this neutralization that is happening? And let's take this, in a few seconds per person.
I guess I haven't exactly understood, but I know that somewhere, even if we're talking vertical versus spread out and all of that, there is a balance. And, we need to figure out where that lies, even in terms of how we're going to use use spaces. And also the other thing is mobility has become a very important part of how cities work and
I'm
function.
talking about a sort of aesthetic value of Indianness or uniqueness, be it a Bombay,
I think you touched upon it already with the adaptive reuse in terms of how we know that we can reuse certain structures only because people are used to being a certain way or using a certain space.
Okay.
Let me try. I think, Ratan, the point is that if architecture is going to respond to the requirement, it's going to respond to the client brief. If you're looking at a building which goes beyond 50 stories, the point is you can't do balconies, you can't do terraces, because at that height, it's very difficult to be able to open windows. So you are going to have buildings which are going to be locked in. You're going to have buildings which have to be air conditioned. So internally and in terms of facade, that building is going to respond in that manner. You can't even put out any projections in terms of flower beds or anything else. I mean, that ends at your 12th, 15th floor. So I think somewhere that architecture will have to respond to the need of that location, need of the use or consumption of the FSI, and at best we might be able to address this in terms of building facade treatments, in terms of either creating some sort of indulations to the building or some treatments in terms of the materials that we try to use at that point.
Okay. Jimmy?
Every city in the world is known through its architecture, be it the old age or the new age, and you recognize the city through that architectural medium. However, speaking of Mumbai and the current DC rules, I think whatever scope for creativity was left has been throttled, strangulated, and killed. Today we face a challenge. Within the given DC rules, everything is already predetermined and set. There is precious little that an architect can do with his creativity across. And especially if you're talking of high rises, your open spaces are defined, your floor heights are defined, balconies have come in through fungible into the FSI. So there is flower beds have gone. So there's nothing that's left for an architect to do unless and until the client at the other end is willing to sacrifice a few square feet here and there, which cannot happen where the real estate price is so high. So architecture is going through its really bad time right now.
Yeah. Nandini, you want to do a quick comment? We have to wrap up this session because we're running time.
I think looking at South Mumbai and your question, we hope that in 20 years people can walk down the street and still reminisce on what it used to be like. So, for example, if we compare it to London, they're very conscious of their streetscape. So let's get back to the human level. Let's get back to the human scale and try to preserve what we have.
Yeah. Just a quick, another anecdote from the old days. When we were studying Cuff Parade as a new residential development in the early 70s, and I was making a study, and we were doing interviews, you had ladies, mums on the 25th floor clapping and saying, "Beta," you know, because she'd come from a third floor environment and trying to call the kids from underneath at the garden level, okay? Another realization that I had, and just giving you a comment about the vertical versus horizontal, Khushru Bagh and Rustam Bagh, I don't know if you guys have been aware of these Parsi colonies, yeah? The FSI of Rustam Bagh is exactly the same as the FSI of New Cuff Parade. Not new Cuff Parade, I'm saying Colabas Cuff Parade, okay? And hold it, too many, no, too many jokes on the, but anyway, Khushru Bagh is a ground plus 2-storied structure. It's a continuous building with huge open spaces, huge public spaces, huge community spaces, and the FSI is almost 3 or 3.5, which is what the Cuff Parade FSI was at that time, okay? Anyway, I think it's time to thank my panelists. Sorry, we ran out of time. And thank you very much for being a patient and hearing audience. Thank you.
May I kindly request our panel members to please stay back. And I'm going to first request Mr. Amar Jadhav to please come on stage and present a memento to our moderator, our panel host, Mr. Ratan. And let's keep that applause going, ladies and gentlemen. Another fresh set of perspectives that we gathered from the session. May I also request Mr. Vinay Thakur to please come on stage and present a memento to Mr. Jimmy Mistry. May I further request Kunjal Trivedi to please come on stage and present a memento to Ms. Nandini Sampath. May I request Deepak Gokani to please come on stage and present a memento to Ms. Priya Vakil. And finally, may I please request Mr. Ranjit Deval to please come on stage and present a memento to architect Shekhar Patki. And with that, I'd like to thank our panel members once again. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, ma'am. It is absolutely fascinating to see how our panel members and our speakers are ensuring that we take away some fantastic perspectives from all the discussions that we've been having since morning.